First one is very general. I'm just talking about accreditation, different forms of accreditation. The second one is about the AACSB process, complete process. The third one is AACSB standard, just an overview of the 15 standards currently, which is going to change. So we'll look at it overview. Fourth one is important in the sense is the eligibility application, what finally we want to be able to apply. Okay? So that is the plan. So basically I always start with some outline. What are the benefits of accreditation? Different systems. I'll talk about some of this very generally. There's one fundamental difference between accreditation systems in India and abroad, like EQUIS and AACSB and so on. The difference is the foreign ones are a little more subjective. In India, we believe in quantifying everything. Everything is out of 1,000, you get 780 or 800 or something like that. Other systems are not like that. There may be some quantitative measures which are important, but they don't come up with a number for the school. In fact, the interesting part is they go even more granular. I won't get into great details. They leave very little flexibility. As we go along, I'll talk about, for instance, NBA system. So NBA, NAC, NIRF ranking, SACS I will talk about, and then of course get into AACSB. So benefits, of course, some nowadays the trend, I shouldn't say trend, but more emphasis on program accreditation rather than institution accreditation. So the question of whether the institute is getting accredited or the program is getting accredited. If the institute is getting accredited like AACSB and so on, if you want to exclude some programs, they will want to know that, because business programs may be offered in different parts of the university. If it's a standalone institute, it's different, like ISB or IAMs and so on. But if you're offering different programs at the university, they're accrediting the institute. So then you say these programs are excluded only, for instance, here it would be only the Global Business School is the one that is accredited, not all your programs are accredited, because you have banking and finance and other things also. But if you want them to be included, then they will they have to come and study that programs also, those programs. Okay. So basically what are the benefits? An assurance of quality, and important thing is commitment to quality and continuous improvement in all of this, because it's not one time kind of thing, keep on improving. So one of the internet is advanced knowledge through scholarship. Of course, scholarship can be in terms of research, in terms of teaching, pedagogy, or problem solving, and so on. The definition of scholarship has been broadened especially by AACSB. It's not just research only, okay? I mean, academic research, let me put it that way. One big problem I find in India generally, and even abroad also, people don't understand what we mean by research. For some, I'm now talking generally, as I go along I'll digress also, my views. Some think research means only publications in professional journals, discipline, academic discipline journals. Some think writing cases is a research. Some don't. In fact, I always tell this story. One of the students from IIM Bangalore did his PhD somewhere. He went to Wharton, and he was coming as a visiting faculty to ISB. So I knew him, and I was chatting with him. I said he'd been out, was been at Wharton 5-6 years or something like that. So I said, you must be coming close to tenure. They have a tenure system. I said, do you have many publications? He said, I have one or two in academic discipline journal. I have one in HBR. I said, HBR, that's very good. So you must be doing well, I said. Then he said, no, that's what you say. But when I told my area chair, he said, if I were you, I would hide that publication. Because HBR is not peer-reviewed. Okay? It depends upon the editor and so on. So what I'm saying is the people have different notions of why closer to, if I don't talk about ISB, see, if you want international rankings, there is no other way other than discipline-oriented academic publications. Now, that is read by few people, but you get the worldwide ranking. Of course, FT ranking also plays some of it, but not to the same extent as some of the other rankings done abroad. Now, especially the board members and so on, they ask the question, what's the use of all this? Very few are reading, especially the business schools have this problem. So I knew this problem before itself. I know it's always this issue comes up. So he said, board member at ISB, I said, I agree with you, this may not be, but the vision statement says cutting edge research. So I think you should change the vision statement. Then he walked away. So vision statement is cutting edge world rankings, but we don't want to do that. That is the contradiction we have. Because it's expensive, I agree. But if you want to play that game, you have to follow those rules. Or you have to change the rules, which will take much more difficult. So research means different things to different people. And so if for AACSB has actually defined in earlier publications, they don't talk much about it now, but they take everything. They have a very large definition of research. Publications, they call it academic research, pedagogical research, and problem-solving research, and so on. So you have to keep that in mind. AACSB is not only about academic discipline research, but on the other hand, if you want to go for ranking, global rankings, you have to pay much more attention to academic discipline-oriented research, okay? Okay, so it's recognition that you're following certain performance standards, and you can do some comparison benchmarking, although it's not really in the US systems, it's not really comparison in the sense you have universities that are, top 10 universities in terms of ranking, and then someone maybe in the 50th ranking also accredited by AACSB. Because AACSB is mission driven, as we will talk about it later. So, of course, in India, we think accreditation and ranking similar. Some of this concept, see, I was in NAC. So NAC has a system of scoring numbers and so on, and then they come up with some A plus A. I think they just had at that time A star, A and B is B. So above 3.5 was A, I think, or A star. So they said, and the government was more moving towards ranking, or the NIRF ranking has come, so why can't NAC do ranking and so on? So somebody said, yeah, 3.8 is higher than 3.78, so if somebody gets 3.8, it should be ranked higher. That was the thinking along those lines. So you say accreditation can be used for ranking. That is the thinking along those lines. Actually, they have sort of implemented something like that in NAC. They were going to implement. I don't know if they actually did or not. So benchmarking in the sense, that's where your school, comparative schools you have to, not overall benchmarking. That's why AACSB asks for schools which are comparable to you or your competitors and so on. With them you can compare, not with any school, because your mission may be completely different from some others. Somebody may be emphasizing on cutting edge research, you may be emphasizing on more providing opportunities for students, certain background and so on, or you may be specializing in certain areas and things like that. Okay, so continuous improvement and providing information to market and so on. So this is the list. It's not exhaustive. You have NBA, you have NAC, you have AACSB, you have EQUIS. SACS is the South Asian Quality Improvement System based in Hyderabad. AMBA is one, and then Association of Collegiate Business Schools and Programs, ACBSB has been promoting. They see India as a big market, so they have come promoting quite a bit. So some of the faculty, some of the deans are involved in that. And there is this ICAB, IACB and so on. Program accreditation, some have gotten into program accreditation. So NBA says program accreditation. Quantitative, these are all quantitative, but you look at, I listed this, in most of the accreditation, these things will come. The same things with some differences in nomenclature, some combinations and so on, combinations. So if you understand one of them, you can pretty much understand the things, but the emphasis in certain things may be different and so on. That is the main difference. So you have vision, mission, you have governance, program outcomes. Now, emphasis has now become on outcomes rather than output. In the sense, they want to see what your students are doing, how well they're doing, whether they're learning what they're supposed to, and so on. Curriculum and learning process, and so on. See, one problem with NBA, I have not gone into granularity. So, for instance, just for your information, say faculty attributes and contributions, let's say. Suppose research is one component. Out of this 220, research might have, just for number's sake, not exactly, say 100. They'll say research 100, but the peer review team is not allowed to look at entire research. They say research, publications in peer review journals 50, case writing 30, and other research 20 or something. So it's all very granular, very limited scope for the peer review team to judge, in the sense you say some school may be very good in academic publications in professional journals, not so much case writing. Some may be very good in case writing, but you can't give more than, if case writing is only 30 points, you can get maximum of that only. So they make it very granular. When I was in this not NBA, AACSB business school, I suggested, why don't you give the flexibility to the peer review team? You say 100 is fine, but research has different components. Some may decide to emphasize on one than the other. So you give the flexibility, the peer review team can make a decision as to how much to give. And say, no, professor, you don't understand. If we do that, we'll have a lot of court cases, he said. So worried about court cases, because if we get only 50 points, they say you have to justify out. Now it's all fixed. So everything is quantified to avoid court cases. That is the biggest challenge and problem in India. All systems are, NAC is also very quantitative kind of thing. Okay, so these are the points. So the same thing, continuous improvement, total is 1,000. Of course, several sub-criteria are there. They're all broken down. I have not going into details. And scores for each sub-criteria are specified, and very granular side of scoring system. You get 75 and 750 and above, and they have different criteria. At least 60% you can get all criteria, and so on. Okay, you get 6 years, or you get for 3 years and not accredited, and so on. NBA accreditation is that. Really, if you have any questions, feel free to stop. And no, don't want it to be just a one-way talking. Any questions, just get clarified right away. Or you have any comments, welcome. So you don't have to wait till the end. Okay. Any questions or comments what we have talked about so far? Okay. Okay, NAC is institutional accreditation, university or college or institutes of national importance and so on. They also have some department accreditation and program accreditation. They're talking about it. I don't know if they've actually implemented. I think some of it they might have been implemented. So you look at the attributes, they're more or less the same. After all, the school, our education system has this curriculum, teaching, research, infrastructure, student, governance, institutional values, best practices, and so on. Again, they are also very granular. So what I'm trying to say is all the accreditation systems have similar things, but emphasis may be different, scoring may be different, and some may be combined, and so on. Assessment outcome, this is where I said 3.51 to 4 is A++, and this is the new system. And the old system is different, and so on. And of course, the suggestion was, I don't think they have implemented, I'm not sure. It's been some time since I left NAC. Suggestion at that time, and so you get 3.8 is higher than 3.78, so 3.8 should be ranked higher, and so on. And so you forget that the accreditation purpose is different, it's not for ranking. Anyway, NARF ranking is this, you have marks. Again, there are granular systems are there. I'm not going into steps. You will see the same thing, teaching, learning, resources, research and professional practice, graduation outcomes, outreach, and so on. SACS is something based in Hyderabad, but it's a South Asian quality improvement system. It's based upon from EQUIS, actually, originally from EQUIS, European Quality Improvement System. So they have adapted from EQUIS. This is more international in the sense it's South Asian for all India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Maldives, Afghanistan, Nepal, Bhutan, and so on. So they don't have a scoring system, but they also have the same different domain. They call 11 domains, like any other, and several criteria, and each criterion is just valued as rated as, not valued, as more than adequate or less than adequate. So if you take, for instance, some research, it has some criteria within the research. Is it adequate, not adequate, and so on. No numbers, no scoring system, and so on. And overall, they have to take a call. It's always a bit tricky, but that's how the philosophy, even in EQUIS and AACSB may have some scoring in the sense certain proportions you have to maintain in terms of teaching and so on. When we get to that, I'll talk about it. But generally, no numbers are given. Okay, it's not that you are getting a score of this or score of that and so on. So SACs accredited for 5 years or 3 years or not accredited and so on. Okay, this is the first one. Second one we will go to is, this is general first one. Second one we will talk about AACSB process. Any questions on the first general accreditation? That's the one, right? That's the one. Yeah, that's the one. It's already here. Okay, let's look at AACSB accreditation. I think this is, let me just quickly run through. This is the process, I think, right? Yeah. Okay. So institutional accreditation. So as I told you, if you, because business schools, business management programs may be offered in different schools, so then you have to ask for exclusion of that, or you ask for only, I think in this case it would be general global business school will be the one that would be accredited, rather than general university as such. So, okay. If there were no other programs, management programs, all were located in the business school itself, then they could claim that general university is accredited and so on. But the business programs are only the ones that are accredited. Okay?
So I'm just curious about one thing. So here in our system, the law school teaches BBA and JSBF teaches business BCom. So supposing we thought of this, I'm just asking,
Yeah.
that we extend it also to cover those two programs. And those are the only two business programs that I am aware of operating outside JGBS.
Even law school, the program has a BBA LLB.
Yeah, BBA LLB. BBA is not a terminal degree, but it's a part of a 5-year program of which 3 years to. So is it possible to, or is it advisable to actually expand the net and get JGU? In terms of exclusion and everything, clear-cut rules.
Clear-cut rules are there, but you can also ask for exemptions from the rule. So question really is, to which I don't have a definitive answer, is it advantageous or disadvantageous to include them? That some of it maybe we can try and get clarification from this lady whom I know who's in Bombay, whether it will be advantageous, because you don't have any control over that program. in terms of admissions or in terms of the curriculum and so on. Now, if you want to include it, now you have to make a case for it. Okay? Now, whether it will be advantageous to you to include it, I'm not sure. Those things we should ask.
Debate that when we come to it. Right, because also the question is that if it is advantageous to, I mean, is it it's advantageous to JGBS versus advantageous to JGU?
Yeah.
First
Yeah.
assumption would be that if JGU gets this thing, all the other programs will also.
Yeah, all the business programs are accredited.
And the effort going into it may be marginally more.
A little more
than
margin.
what we go through, right?
Yeah. But whether they'll satisfy all those requirements and so on is what you have to see. Because program-wise requirements will be there.
BBA is a bit tough because they have guided by the bar councils, so they are following a different set of rules. BCom could be an option, but BCom just like 2 years. I mean, in that program, they are like only 2 years old. So we need to.
I think we can discuss that.
Yeah, we'll ask that.
I never thought of that, already assuming JGBS only, but one option could be everything in JGU.
No, certainly, I think we should ask and see what, at least get a clarification from our own point of view to see whether it's really advantageous or not. So,
Yeah, I think that's the key question.
So ACE is very much mission driven. So what is your mission, vision is the first important thing. That is what the strategic plan will also concentrate on that. Now immediately somebody asks me, so I can have a mission that I will just provide graduate education and be done with it and so on. So if I satisfy the mission, can I get AACSB accreditation? Answer is no. You have to have mission itself must be reasonably up standards. You can't just have a very low mission statement and say that I'm satisfying that and so on. Because mission driven means basically they'll say if your mission vision is approved, are you delivering what you are saying? That is what is AACSB accreditation is all about. Mission driven means are you delivering what is promised. So it's very important what your mission vision is. And sometimes institutes in India especially have a problem, but they quickly realize when they go to AACSB accreditation. Say, we want to be the best in the world would be my vision statement. So AACSB will ask you, what do you mean by best? What are you going to get ranked? How are you going to get there? Best means what? World, which ranking, what is it, and so on. How are you going to deliver? Then they back down and so on. I know one institution, the university statements were like this, and they got NAC accredited and all that. We want to be the best in the world, or one of them among the best or something. So they were going for AACSB accreditation. So I said, if you have that in mind as part of your vision statement, you'll run into problems with AACSB. They quickly realized that they had a separate vision statement for the school. And of course, all the management programs are within the school, so they get accreditation, institutional accreditation. Okay, so whether there are resources to achieve the mission, and recently more emphasis on engagement, innovation, and impact. Those are the important things, and assurance of learning. Those are important aspects. There are 15 standards. I'll just mention the titles. I have one presentation which will be, the next one will go a little more into this, not completely, but a little more. But one of the things is this 15 standards, they are being reviewed, meaning there is a committee that is reviewing the AACSB mission standards. So the feeling is there are too many, so they're going to reduce it to maybe 10 to 12, maybe combine some of them, maybe get rid of some of them, I don't know, but mostly combining, I don't think. But that will all come finalized by April, that is April 2020. So the new standards will be the ones I'm sure will be applicable to JGBS. Okay. So one is mission, impact, and innovation, that is important. Intellectual contributions. And previously it used to be only intellectual contribution. Now they are stressing on what impact this intellectual contribution is. So you have to some classifications are becoming very tricky and so on. You know, you say you have theory, now what is the impact, how do you measure the impact of that, and so on and so on. But they give guidelines. One thing nice about AACSB documents is they give you a lot of information in terms of saying these are the guidelines, how you can, they suggest what you can show as impact and so on, things like that. So you have to get into much more detail when you are actually filling out some of these forms. Eligibility form less, but when you are actually writing your self-assessment report and so on, self-evaluation report, much more details will be required. Financial strategies is important. So there are 3 standards under the broad category of strategic management and innovation, which is mission, impact and innovation, intellectual contributions, and the financial strategies. And then there is a broad category: participants, students, faculty, and professional staff, 4 standards. Students' admission process, this is where they'll get into details of admissions and so on. Progression, career development. There's something called faculty sufficiency and development. We'll talk a little bit more about that. That is important. Faculty management and support, what sort of support faculty get, professional staff sufficiency and so on. And then learning and teaching, there are 5 standards: curriculum management, curriculum content, student-faculty interactions, degree program equivalent, different degree programs, teaching effectiveness. Sorry. There are 3 under academic and professional engagement. By far the most complicated one will be faculty qualifications and engagement. You have to categorize faculty into 5 categories. We will talk about that later. Sort of a professional, scholarly, academic, and so on. We'll see that. That's somewhat tricky. And see, one issue is they give a lot of guidelines and so on in the document, but they leave it a lot to the institution for you to define and so on. So you have to convince your mentor. Once the eligibility application is approved, mentor. First you have to convince the mentor that what you are saying is reasonable. So I would qualify somebody as scholarly academic if he says publishes in, I'm just using this as an example, if he is published in B category journals. So mentor may say, no, that is not sufficient. You must have at least 1 or 2. Somebody may say 2, so it may be okay, A category or something like that. So these are some things that are a bit vague, and you have to convince the mentor, and then of course the peer review team and so on. Of course, you can err on the safe side by saying it will be A, then they won't have any problem. But if you want to reduce your sort of, in a sense, standards by saying, B category is okay for me and so on, then you have to convince the mentor. Okay? So faculty qualifications and engagement will also become very important. So let's look at the process. We'll get back to the standards. This is the 3rd presentation. We'll look at a little more detail on it. So you must be a member, which you are, so there's no issue. You have to submit an eligibility application. You can submit it anytime during the year, and they'll scrutinize it for appropriateness and so on. If they think it is fine, they will send it to the initial accreditation committee. There's something called initial accreditation committee. And it will go, they have this initial accreditation committee. Many of these committees meet at some, they'll have some fixed dates during the year, maybe 2, 3 meetings or 4 meetings and so on. So depending upon when you submit, it will go to the next meeting. So if you have missed one, next meeting only you have to wait. So, yeah, so you have to plan accordingly. Okay.
So
Okay.
even if is there a period before which the application closes for this one, like 3 days before the meeting if we submit?
Yeah, you have to submit some time before. Yeah, because they have to scrutinize and all that. So there's some time. I don't know the exact dates, but we can get that. So if the application is assigned, a mentor is assigned to develop what is called Initial Self-Evaluation Report, ISER. Okay? So mentor, of course, should avoid any conflict of interest. AAC will be liaison, staff liaison is also assigned, somebody from the AACSB. So that liaison person would be the primary contact. So presumably maybe somebody from India, they have an office in Mumbai, maybe somebody from there, maybe the liaison officer. So you get an official letter of approval and assignment of mentor and so on. Then they'll send you the invoice. Of course, you have to pay the fees, initial fees. There's a whole set of fees. I'm not getting into the total cost and so on, but the whole set of fees to be paid as we go along. So mentor works with the school to evaluate the current alignment of the school with accreditation standards. How close are you? Are you reasonably? You don't have to be aligned right away. They give you time. But if the mentor feels you're not going to achieve it in the next 5, 6 years, you will say, no, you better not, the application is maybe rejected. But that is a really rare case, okay? Typically most schools will be ready, some may be ready much sooner, some may be longer, some may take 5, 6 years, but some typical 3, 4 years you should be able to, 4, 5 years you should be able to do it. That should not be an issue, but one has to be careful, okay? Again, these time limits are also flexible. I know schools that have been going on for 5, 6 years and so on, they're still in the process. If they think that you're making progress, they won't suddenly say, no, your time is up or anything like that, okay? Okay. About 5 years, may recommend withdrawal. So, you have to evaluate current alignment with each of the 15 standards. So in some sense you have to know, but it may not be a very detailed alignment and you don't have to satisfy all the 15 standards when you submit the application. Certainly when you submit the final self-evaluation report, then you have to satisfy the standards. Okay?
So this invoice that they send, so that is then going to be an annual thing, right? As long as you are in.
No, your membership is annual thing, yes, as long as you're in it. Annual, then, yeah, I think this invoice is annual, but then there are other invoices when a mentor is assigned. Some mentors usually would want to come and visit and see the school because they have to make some initial evaluation, right, whether you're not far. So all those will be separate expenses and so on. But this invoice is basically, I had some details. I've forgotten.
3,300 to be paid for membership.
Plus the mentor fees also there, which is the one time.
Visit and everything.
Visit is separate.
Visit is separate.
Visit is separate, but there is a mentor fee also in addition
Right,
to that
yeah.
3,500.
We have detailed it out in the presentation.
Yeah. I have the details somewhere. I didn't.
Every year? Cumulative.
Okay. I think he has, anyway. Okay. Okay, for each standard, not only evaluate the current situation with reference to the standard, but also document if it's in alignment with the standard or state clearly plan of action. This is important. Plan of action to be implemented and the time frame to achieve alignment. That's what you have to do. Okay.
Another question is, so for example, if we have plans to mount a program, let's say at this point in time, the program, let's say we are in the planning stage, so we can include that program also, right? Saying that, this has just been mounted and
If you have finalized, in the sense you are definitely going to launch, I would include. But you're still not sure, you have provision to, because there will be some time gap anyway. So you can say before the mentor comes, you can, before the mentor is even assigned, you can, at the time of ISER, you can include also.
we can include that.
But if you have already decided, better to say that that's part of the program when you fill. At that table, when you fill out the programs, you can put, say, to be launched and so on. Okay? So you need to submit a gap analysis for each standard, meaning, where you are with reference to the standard, how you plan. This plan of action is very important. And you should typically have a plan of action that will say you will meet the standards in about 3 years, within 3 years, basically. If you are further away than 3 years, you think you could have potential problems, okay? I mean, as I said, they're not so strict. It may take you 4 years, but if you think you can do it in 3 years, but something goes wrong, it may take 4 years, they're not going to say no. But if you think it's actually going to take 4 or 5 years, then I think you're probably too early to apply and so on. Okay? There are some tables you have to complete, table 2.1 and 15.1, 2, and the strategic plan you have to complete. These tables are basically about tables 2 is a reference to standard 2. The numbering is that standard 2 is about, what is standard 2? Intellectual contribution. So you have to provide some summary, total and contributions and so on, where it's a summary kind of statement. But when you actually submit the final self-evaluation report, you have to have details faculty-wise and so. The other 15, I said, is the tricky one, which is faculty qualifications and engagement. There's table to be filled, faculty qualifications and so on. Okay, we'll talk a little more about those standards when we get there. But again, not complete details, but at least.
Just a question here. So there are people who have submitted thesis yet not achieved their degree. So we include them as PhDs or?
There is a classification, ABD they call, all but dissertation. So if they are in that, certain percentage you can include, a certain percentage of the faculty. But you can't say everybody in the faculty is ABDs, and so I would include all of them. I'm just saying extreme cases to illustrate the point. But if you have, say, 50 faculty and 4 or 5 are ABDs, fine, yeah. Scholarly academic, basically saying scholarly academic. See, the easiest and best criterion is scholarly academic. If all your faculty are scholarly academic, then you'll have very little problems. But you will have some professionals and so on, or some may, scholarly academic, I'm jumping the gun, but they might have got a PhD, but they got it 5 years before, more than 5 years before. Then sustaining is an issue. So if you have not done any, you got a PhD, say 6 years ago, but you've not written a single paper, you cannot be called scholarly academic. So you have the 5-year thing. So some institute, what they do is they quickly hire young PhD scholars, PhDs. So they get 5 years to publish. So they'll go scholarly academic. So these are some of the games that people play, but I'm not suggesting.
Would I give you guys a sense? I mean, we can just do a self-check here. How many of us are within 5 years of our PhD? I'm not, obviously. You can just raise your hand. You will get a sense of our faculty distribution.
More than 5 years, is it?
No, within 5 years of your PhD.
Within 5 years, okay.
It's a pretty young group.
Young group.
Almost, I would say, what, 75%?
Yeah, you are in good shape in that way.
How many of you are expecting PhDs in the next 1 year? All right. By the time this application goes in,
yeah, so they're all, we are expecting in 1 year, you must be ABDs at least,
they're
right?
all
ABDs. So
Maybe by the time this goes, they would be.
so maybe we have to say, okay, who are us, the old fogies around here? So that's the distribution.
yeah, old fogies is not the criterion. Old fogies who have not published anything in the last. That I am not asking. I am not asking that question. So I am not asking that question.
But then you have to maintain those percentages within that each category, right?
Yeah, but.
Certain balance.
But if you have largely academic, scholarly academic, I'm just an extreme case to illustrate. If 100% are scholarly academic, you'll have no problem because everything, the percentages will include scholarly academic also. So you will meet that immediately. When you have other categories, lots of them, there's different percentages are there, program-wise, teaching and so on. So if you have other categories is the worst. There are 4 categories and yeah. Worse in the sense they don't consider them the ratios they calculate. There's some ratios that they calculate. So. But it's done program-wise, so you have to be careful that.
So the life of a journal article is how long? I mean, how long can you claim yourself to be scholarly academic? How old can your last publication be?
No, they look at in the last 5 years prior to the review period. So your review period is, let us say, is 21, 22, 5 years before that.
And you have to.
You have published.
One,
No, that is why there is a lot of flexibility in these things. You must have done scholarly activities during the last 5 years to sustain scholarly academic. Now, what are these activities? Some flexibility is there. So you can say publications in some only in Scopus listed or something like that, or you can say editor of journals and so on. So there's some flexibilities.
And all that also will come in.
Yeah. So those are the tricky things in the sense you say, I know one university, they give points for each, and you score more than a certain point, you sustain the scholarly academic and so on. So during the last 5 years, what you have done becomes important. It's not just publications only. Okay. So
But is it like a minimum thing that if you're published, you are in?
yeah. If you're no, not just one, I think, but certain level. Yeah. There's a lot of decisions you have to make, and also you have to convince the mentor first that you are not diluting the standards in a sense. For instance, I always use the extreme cases to say, so I say any C publication is okay for me. They won't accept. We'll say, on the other extreme, I say 3 publications in 5 years, they say, oh, you're very good. You maintain. I'm just saying extreme cases. So it's a question of a lot of people will fall in between, and that's where the subjectivity comes in. Okay. A lot of people who got their PhD more than 5 years before. If you're within 5 years, you're fine. You don't have to worry about it. Okay? Okay. I should evaluate current 15 standards. We were here. So you submit all this. Table 2.1 is about all that I talked about, faculty sufficiency, is faculty qualification, and you have to submit a strategic plan as well along with that. So it will take typically 1 to 2 years to complete. I think you have done a lot of work, you should be able to do in 8-9 months, I think you should be able to. We are shooting for April, May, I think you should be able to complete everything. Because you've already done quite a bit of work. And so,
the AACSB committee members are not getting their winter holidays.
But before that eligibility, then I started. It will take some time.
Some of it is also gone.
So, sorry to interrupt you again, this program-wise faculty list that you said, which means you'll have to now, so in reality what it is that faculty members teach across programs?
no, across program, but each program, just jumping there, but since you have raised it, each program, suppose you teach, okay, and he teaches, and I teach, let's say, I'm not, suppose I'm other faculty, so amount of time, how many credit hours or how many hours of teaching you taught, how many hours he has taught, how many hours I have taught, total is taken into account. And percentage of faculty to be taught by what is called a participating faculty, and one is will become important. Program-wise, they look at it. You might say, for instance, I'm just saying, suppose you have some professionals teaching, and they teach, and they're the only ones who are teaching in BBA program. None of you teach in the BBA program. Again, I'm using extreme cases to identify. So they'll say, no, that is not, because these are not for your faculty, they are other faculty, and you don't satisfy the requirements.
My question was, is it okay if I teach in 3 programs?
Yeah, that's no problem. Typically, people will teach.
First classification of the faculty member, then
Yeah, you can teach in different programs. So they program-wise, they calculate the percentage of teaching by first participant. There's a notion called participating. This is also some flexibility you have. You're called participating faculty or supporting faculty. Now, who is a participating faculty, who is a supporting faculty? Typically, of course, everybody who is full-time here and so on, it will be participating faculty. But even some of the others, you can call them participating faculty. You may have some industry person who comes and teaches, but he's actively involved in your placement activities, or he's actively on some committees and so on. So you can claim to be, this is where some flexibility is there. They can be classified as participating. For instance, I can tell you at ISB had always lot of visiting faculty. In fact, our concern when we went for accreditation was how AACSB would treat. So two things which worked in our favor. One is we put that is in our mission statement itself, which was there always. The school wants to have visiting faculty from good schools, and certain proportion of the teaching to be done by visiting faculty. So that was part of the mission statement. So that helped. Second part was, we said this is participating. Still it's a question of whether participating or whether they are supporting faculty. So we said if somebody had come and taught, those who are in committees, area chairs, we said there will be participating faculty. In addition, those who have come and taught last three times at least in the last 5 years would be called participating. In the sense that continuity is there, continuous. Now, whether they would accept it or not was an issue, but they accepted that. So you have flexibility in all of this, but you have to convince the mentor, and it should be something reasonable and so on. Okay, so 1 year, I would say in this case 8, 9 months you should be able to do it. So what happens then? The initial accreditation committee will review the ISER. So there are 4 possible outcomes. Your ISER is good, then they say, okay, fine, everything you're looking good. You can now go ahead and write the self-evaluation report. And then this is something strange, and then they will invite you to apply for an initial accreditation visit. You can't just ask for a peer review team to be assigned. They have to tell you that, okay, you are now ready, and then you say, okay, that's just a technical process. But basically, if you are in the first stage, they will appoint a peer review team chair. They don't appoint the complete committee. Then the peer review team chair is supposed to help the institution in preparing the ISER. But if you have done enough work, like we did in ISB, we had practically the ISER, that is the final evaluation report. We had the final evaluation almost complete, and we sort of got some comments from the chair. What I would typically suggest is you should at least have a reasonably good draft of the final self-evaluation report even before the PRT chair is done. Once the ISER is accepted, you see, AACSB works with some kind of time gap, in the sense, once you have submitted the ISER, you don't know, but you can take a guess. If you think you are in good shape, you may start preparing the self-evaluation report. If you don't meet some of the standards, you say, okay, well, let's wait and see what happens. Because we are not sure whether they will accept, or you may be in the second category. Most of the time it is in the second category, which is accepted, but the recommendation school may enter the action implementation phase. That means you have identified standards, you have identified some gaps. Now we want a 3-year plan for you to satisfy the standards. Many times that is what will happen, actually. So then mentor will, of course, continue to work with the school, and so you have to submit updated ISERs. So showing that you're making progress with reference to the gap and with reference to the standards and so on, you're able to meet. So this could take 3 years or 2 years, 1 year if you're close. If you're not very close, it could take 3 years and so on. But the whole process, initial accreditation, should not take more than 5 years. Again, as I said earlier, AACSB is quite flexible. You are almost there, but if 5 years is gone, they're not going to say, don't, you're closed and so on. These are general guidelines. So implementation period can be typically not more than 3 years. Fourth one is not as good as third one is not as good as the second one. They said, okay, but you have to revise this, not accepted. So you revise and resubmit, like, like our papers and so on. Revise and resubmit doesn't mean that they have accepted. So then, of course, you have to revise, and further development is needed and so on. But it's not as bad as the last one, which is reject. So revise and resubmit is not reject. So last one is reject, okay? So most of the time, I think people, institutes will be in the second category. But you have done a lot of work and you're okay. If you're in the first category, nothing like that. Okay. Okay. So you are asked to prepare the final self-evaluation report. Peer review team chair is appointed. Now, of course, you should also avoid conflict of interest and so on. The chair is supposed to guide in writing the final self-evaluation, but I would typically suggest you have at least the draft done. Chair may want to come and visit to see the school and so on. All those will be additional expenses. The chair wants to come. Yeah, the chair typically, sometimes the chair may say, no, I don't have to come. Sometimes the chair wants to come and so see. So, okay. Then after that is other members are appointed. The chair has to give some sort of a feedback. Basically, the chair guides in the preparation of the self-evaluation report. So chair has to say, okay, they have the self-evaluation report is ready and they are prepared and so on. Then the team will be appointed. The chair gives the feedback to IAC, to AACSB.
So this self-evaluation also takes 6 months to 1 year time frame?
That, yes, it will take, typically it will take 6 months to 1 year, especially. See, there's some time gaps because the chair is appointed, that will take some time. They work, and the chair, if the chair wants to come, he'll say, I'll come 3 months later. And so you can't really say, no, you better come 1 year, 1 month before. So 3 months, he said. So 3 months will be gone by the comes. So that's why it's a good idea to have some draft, draft, and as soon as the chair is appointed, send him a copy of that. So that he will have it and you can reduce the time gap in that. And you make it clear it's a draft because he's supposed to make comments. Don't say this is the final self-evaluation report because then the chair can get upset. He's supposed to guide you and how can you say you have the final self-evaluation report? You should say draft and you are waiting for your comments and so on. So, okay? Okay. So, other members are appointed and then they will come and give a visit report, a recommendation, accreditation, deferral or no accreditation. I'm not sure they'll actually give you the complete report. They may give you some exit kind of thing. It's a little unclear. They didn't give, I know in the past they didn't give us the report actually, but some people said they are actually giving the report. I'm not sure that we can get that clarified. The earlier was they would just give you some general idea and say, this is what we are likely to recommend, you're doing well. From what they say, you know whether they're going to recommend yes or no kind of thing, but not actually giving the recommendation. Of course, there is no guarantee. If there have been very rare instances, 1 or 2 maybe, where the recommendation of the PRT was not approved by the IAC, okay, for whatever reason it is. They don't tell you the reasons and so on. You have to wait till the IAC approves, the board of directors approve. But once the IAC approves, then there is no issue. Okay. So that is the process. Any questions and so on before we look at a little bit more details of the AACSB standards? You want to break now? Fine.
Yeah, I was thinking, but if the refreshments are not here, I thought it already arrived. Or they are kept it outside. I'll just go find out. So maybe you can change to the next one, but we may, depending upon whether the refreshments have arrived.
Sure.
Or they are on that side. Okay.